My husband hit me after his mother spoke, but what he saw next shattered him completely. My name is Emily. I'm in my late 20s, and I've been married to Jason for 3 years. In the beginning, we had the kind of marriage people would admire. He was funny, protective, and made me feel like I was his whole world. But as time passed, his mother, Linda, began taking up more and more space in our lives. Linda is the type of woman who doesn't just visit, she invades. She'd come over without warning, open cabinets, rearrange furniture, and make comments about how things should be done the right way, meaning her way. Nothing I did was good enough. My cooking was bland, my cleaning wasn't thorough, and she even made remarks about how I dressed. It wasn't just little digs, it was constant, sharp, and calculated. And the worst part was that Jason never told her to stop. Instead, he'd nod, sometimes even agreeing with her. I tried to brush it off for a long time, telling myself that maybe she just wanted what was best for her son. But it cut deeper each time, especially when I saw Jason's silence. It was as though every word she spoke carried more weight in his mind than anything I could ever say. One evening, we were sitting at the dinner table. I had cooked a simple meal, nothing fancy, just something to get us through a long day. Linda looked at my plate, then at Jason, and smirked. She leaned back in her chair and said, "It's a shame, Jason. You married a woman who can't even give you a child. She's just a burden who'll hold you back your whole life." The words hit me harder than I can describe, but before I could even process them, Jason's face changed. His jaw tightened and his eyes turned cold. He stood, and in one sudden motion, his hand struck across my face. The sound of the slap filled the room, sharp and heavy. For a moment, everything stopped. The clatter of forks and plates, the sound of breathing, it all went silent. My cheeks stung, my ears rang, but I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even move. Instead, I sat there, still staring at him. Jason's chest rose and felt like he was waiting for me to yell back, maybe to collapse in tears. But I didn't give him that. I just looked at him, my eyes calm and steady, as if the slap hadn't broken me, but had built something colder inside me. He had no idea what he had just done. He had no idea that the look on my face that night would be the start of something he would never recover from. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. Jason wasn't always the man who raised his hand at me. When we first met, he was the type who opened doors, pulled me close on cold nights, and made sure I felt safe. He would send me flowers without a reason, hold my hand in crowded places, and tell me I was his best friend. That version of him feels like a stranger now, someone I used to know but can no longer find. The changes didn't come all at once. At first, it was little things I could ignore. Linda would stop by without calling, claiming she was just checking in. She'd walk into the kitchen, lift lids off pots, and comment on how the food smelled. Too salty, or too bland. Always something to make me second-guess myself. Sometimes she'd march into the living room and move decorations around, insisting she had an eye for these things. I tried to laugh it off, but inside it gnawed at me. I wanted Jason to notice, to step in and tell her it was too much. So I brought it up one night. I told him how her words left me feeling small, how her constant visits made me feel like I had no space of my own. He barely looked up from his phone before saying, "She means well, Emily. That's just how she is." It was like hitting a wall. My feelings slid right off him, dismissed before they even had a chance to settle. The more I spoke, the less he seemed to hear. Over time, it stopped being worth the fight. Jason started echoing Linda's opinions, as if her thoughts mattered more than mine. If I suggested something, he'd brush it aside. If she suggested the same thing, suddenly it was brilliant. It didn't take long for me to realize that her voice was louder in his head than mine ever could be. I learned to fall silent, not because I agreed, but because I saw no point in trying to compete with her shadow. Instead, I began watching how quickly he took her side, how easily he brushed me off, how blind he was to the way her presence ate away at us. I stopped expecting him to notice me the way he once did. My love for him didn't disappear all at once. It drained slowly, like water slipping through cracks I didn't know were there. I still cared, but it wasn't the same. Something inside me had shifted too. I no longer clung to him the way I used to. I was stepping back little by little, holding myself in ways he couldn't. I didn't argue, didn't beg him to see me. I just let him go where he was already heading, closer to her, further from me. And all the while, a quiet part of me was taking notes, memorizing every word, every look, every dismissal. I didn't know it then, but I was preparing myself for the storm that was coming. It started with the late nights. Jason would come home long after dinner, his tie loosened, his excuses rehearsed. "Work emergency," he'd say, barely looking at me as he walked past. At first, I believed him. He had always been dedicated to his job, and staying late wasn't unusual. But then it became constant. Night after night, he'd vanish until the early hours, and his explanations sounded thinner each time. I began to notice small details that didn't fit. The faint trace of perfume that clung to his shirt collar, a scent too sweet and floral to belong in any office. The way he would head straight to the shower as soon as he walked through the door, as if washing away something he didn't want me to see. His phone stayed glued to him, even when he slept, tucked under his pillow. Linda didn't help. One evening, as if testing me, she said, "If Emily can't give you children, Jason, you deserve to find happiness elsewhere. A man shouldn't waste his best years waiting." She smiled when she said it, her voice sharp enough to cut. Jason didn't argue. He didn't tell her it was cruel. He only sat there, silent, like the thought had already crossed his mind. That was when the seed of suspicion began to grow. The late nights, the perfume, the sudden need for distance, it all pointed in one direction. My stomach tightened at the thought, but I refused to let myself react without knowing for sure. If there was betrayal hiding in my home, I would uncover it with my own hands. So I began to watch him carefully, not with questions but with quiet calculation. When he tossed receipts into the trash, I took them out later and studied them. A dinner for two at a restaurant I'd never been to. Gas charges from parts of town far from his office. Hotel bar tabs at hours that didn't make sense. I started keeping track of times, noting when he left, when he came back, what excuses he used. The patterns began to appear. Days when his work emergencies lined up neatly with charges that had nothing to do with work. Every excuse he gave, I wrote down. Every detail he forgot to cover, I stored away. I wasn't ready to confront him yet. If I confronted him too soon, he would twist it, deny it, and I'd be left with nothing but doubts. I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof, undeniable and sharp enough to cut through any lie he could tell. So I kept my silence, watching from the shadows of my own home. To him, I looked the same, quiet, distant, maybe even resigned. But inside, I was awake, alert, and waiting. Whatever truth he was hiding, I was going to drag it into the light. And when I did, he wouldn't be able to run from it. The night Jason's hand struck my face was the night something inside me changed. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't beg him to see what he had done. Instead, I felt myself turn cold, like ice spreading through my veins. The sting on my cheek was nothing compared to the silence that settled between us. Jason stood there, his chest rising and falling, as though he expected me to explode. When I didn't, his expression shifted. He muttered a weak apology, his voice small, like he wanted the moment to disappear if he just said the right words. "I'm sorry, Emily. I didn't mean it." Before I could respond, Linda's voice cut through the room. "She drove you to it, Jason. A wife should know how to respect her husband. If she pushes too far, she should expect the consequences." Her words were sharp, full of satisfaction, as if she had been waiting for them. I looked at her, then at him, and it became clear. This wasn't an accident. This was a cycle, a game where she whispered poison, and he acted it out on me. And if I stayed quiet, it would only grow worse. Jason sat down, rubbing his forehead, already moving past what he had done. To him, the slap was just a moment of anger, something to be smoothed over with an apology. To Linda, it was justified. To me, it was a turning point. In that silence, I made a vow to myself. I would not let this continue. I would not be their victim. They thought I was weak, someone they could push around until I broke. But they didn't understand that I wasn't breaking, I was hardening. I didn't argue back that night. I didn't defend myself against Linda's word. I kept my voice calm, my face still. The less they saw of my thoughts, the safer my plan would be. Because while they believed I was shrinking into silence, I was already building something stronger inside me. As Jason leaned back in his chair and Linda smirked, I studied them both. His weakness, her cruelty. He had let her twist him into something unrecognizable, and she enjoyed every second of it. But neither of them saw what was in my eyes that night. They only saw a quiet woman, sitting in the chair where they thought they had left her broken. But inside, I was planning. I wasn't going to shout or fight. I wasn't going to beg for change. I was going to show them what it felt like to underestimate me. I would make them regret the night they thought they had won. They believed the slap ended the fight. They didn't know it was only the beginning. I knew I couldn't just rely on my suspicions. If I wanted to end this the right way, I needed proof, something he couldn't twist into lies. So I began to collect what he left behind without even realizing. Every time Jason tossed a receipt onto the counter or crumpled one into his pocket, I took it. Dinner charges for two, always at places I had never been. Hotel bars with dates and times that matched his late nights. Gas receipts from areas far from his office. One by one, I stored them away, small pieces of a puzzle I was determined to finish. I kept my movements quiet. To Jason, I looked calm, maybe even detached. I didn't ask questions anymore, and he seemed relieved by that. But the truth was, I was listening to every detail, watching every slip. His excuses came too easily, and sometimes they didn't even match. I noted each one down, building a timeline in my head. Then, I decided to get closer to the truth another way. I reached out to one of his co-workers, someone I'd met at a holiday party the year before. Over coffee, I steered the conversation carefully until his name came up. That's when she let it slip. Jason had been seen with a woman named Tiffany. She said it casually, not realizing how deep the knife cut when the name left her lips. My chest tightened, but I kept my face steady. I asked no questions, just smiled and changed the subject. Inside, though, I knew I had what I needed, a name. Still, a name wasn't enough. I needed something undeniable, something he couldn't walk away from with another weak apology. That's when I hired a private investigator. It felt strange, stepping into that office and laying out my suspicions, but the man I spoke to didn't judge. He just nodded, took the details, and promised he'd find the truth. The wait was the hardest part. Every night Jason came home late. Every time he smelled faintly of something that wasn't mine, the anger burned inside me. But I held it back. I smiled when I needed to, stayed quiet when he dismissed me, and let him believe I was fading into the background. All the while, I was waiting for the phone call that would end any doubt. When the investigator called, his voice was calm, almost too calm. He had the photos. I met him in his office, and he slid the envelope across the desk. My hands shook as I opened it. And there they were, Jason and Tiffany, caught in the glow of hotel lights, kissing as if the world outside didn't exist. Picture after picture, undeniable proof of betrayal. The pain hit me hard, like a wave I couldn't stop. My heart clenched, my throat tightened, but I didn't let the tears fall. I forced myself to breathe, to hold it in, because this wasn't the moment to break. This was evidence, the weapon I had been waiting for. I slipped the photos back into the envelope, my fingers steady now. I would save this pain for later, when it mattered most. For now, it was mine to hold, and his to pay for when the time was right. The envelope of photos never left my side. I kept them hidden, waiting for the right time. But before I could use them, I needed to be ready. One mistake and Jason could turn everything against me. That's when I found myself sitting in the quiet office of a divorce lawyer, telling him my story in a steady voice. He didn't look surprised. He listened, nodded, and then laid it out for me. "Gather everything," he said. "Bank statements, pay stubs, property record. And don't forget proof of the abuse. A bruise, a photo, a medical record, anything. The more you have, the stronger your case." I left his office with a folder of instructions and a plan forming in my head. At home, I moved carefully, pulling documents when Jason wasn't around. Every bill, every account, every slip of paper with numbers on it, I copied them. I stored the copies in a safe deposit box I opened under a different name. No one knew about it, not even my closest friend. It was my insurance, locked away where neither Jason nor Linda could reach it. At the same time, I changed the way I moved around the house. On the surface, nothing looked different. In fact, I made myself appear softer, kinder, as though I was trying to fix what was broken. I asked him about his day, laughed at his dry jokes, even cooked meals I knew he liked. I became the wife he thought he wanted again, and he seemed to believe it. He didn't notice that my eyes lingered a little longer on his bank statements when he left them lying around. He didn't question why I insisted on doing the laundry myself, even though I hated it. He didn't realize I was no longer his partner, but his quiet observer, watching and collecting every piece of leverage I could. Linda, on the other hand, noticed me more than ever. She came over with her usual smug air, her words sharp and deliberate. One afternoon, while Jason was at work, she looked me straight in the eye and said, "A wife should serve her husband, not challenge him. Maybe if you remembered that, he wouldn't need to find comfort elsewhere." Her words hit like venom, but I didn't flinch. I smiled, small and polite, and poured her another cup of coffee as if I agreed. Inside, though, my thoughts were steel. "Keep talking, Linda. Every word you use to tear me down is another rope tightening around your son's neck. One day, those words will choke him, not me." I let her believe she had won that little moment. She leaned back, satisfied, sipping her coffee while I tucked my fury deep inside where she couldn't see it. The truth was, I was no longer just a wife living under their thumb. I was preparing in silence, step by step, stacking everything I needed like weapons hidden in plain sight. And when the time came, neither of them would see me coming. The night of the dinner, everything looked ordinary on the surface. I set the table carefully, laid out the dishes, and smiled as Jason's family filed in one by one. His siblings, his father, and of course Linda, all took their places. Jason looked pleased, maybe even proud, thinking I was trying to mend things. He had no idea what I had planned. We ate in polite silence at first. I kept the conversation light, asking about work, about the weather, anything that sounded normal. Linda, as usual, slipped in her comments here and there, little reminders of where she thought I belonged in the family. I let them slide, nodding politely, never letting my face betray what was coming. When dinner ended and dessert was served, I stood and walked to the side table. Jason looked confused as I set a small speaker down and pressed play. At first, the room was filled with static, then Linda's voice came through, sharp and unmistakable. If Emily can't give you children, Jason, you should find happiness elsewhere. A man deserves a real woman. The fork dropped from one of his sister's hands. Jason's father sat back, his face tight. Linda's cheeks flushed red, but before she could open her mouth, the recording continued. Jason's own voice filled the room. He was on the phone, his words dripping with mockery. She's weak, Tiffany. She'll never leave me. She's too useless for that. A laugh followed, the kind that once charmed me but now sounded like poison. Jason's face drained of color. Linda sputtered, reaching across the table. This is taken out of context, she started, but no one was listening. His siblings' eyes darted from her to Jason, their expressions filled with disbelief and disgust. I didn't say a word. Instead, I reached into my bag and laid the photographs on the table, one after another. Jason and Tiffany in a hotel lobby. Jason and Tiffany kissing under a neon sign. Jason with his hand on her waist, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. The room went silent. The only sound was the soft clink of a spoon against a plate as someone shifted nervously. Jason's father stared at the photos, his jaw tightening with each one. His siblings avoided his eyes. Linda reached for a photo, but I pulled it back before she could touch it. Jason's hands shook as he tried to gather himself, but there was no excuse he could give. Every word, every image, every secret he thought was safe now sat in the open, laid bare for his family to see. I leaned back in my chair, calm and steady, while they all looked at him like a stranger they no longer recognized. For the first time, Jason wasn't the man in control. He was exposed, stripped down to the truth he had worked so hard to hide. Jason opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand before he could get a word out. My voice was steady, calm, almost too calm for the storm that was in the room. I'm divorcing you, Jason, I said. No shouting, no tears, just plain fact. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. His siblings froze. His father leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Linda gasped, but I didn't give any of them a chance to respond. I went on, each word measured. I've already filed charges for domestic assault. I had the photos taken after you hit me. They're with my lawyer, and the case is in motion. Jason's face twisted, his lips parting as if to deny it, but he stopped. He knew it was true. He remembered the night. He remembered the mark he left behind. I looked around the table, meeting each set of eyes. I didn't just come here to show you what kind of man Jason has become. I came to tell you that he will answer for it. Linda tried to step in, her voice sharp. This is nonsense. You're twisting everything to make yourself the victim. Jason as always. I cut her off, my smile thin. Funny, Linda. Do you remember the prenup you pushed me to sign? The one you swore would keep me from ever touching Jason's money. Her expression faltered for the first time. Well, it seems you didn't read the fine print closely enough. That prenup guarantees me a generous settlement if he cheats. And I have every piece of proof I need. Receipts. Photos. Witnesses. Everything. Jason's hand clenched on the table. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time, realizing too late that the silence he mistook for weakness had been strategy. You thought you were protecting him, I said, turning to Linda. But what you really did was hand me the rope to tie around his neck. The room was still, everyone watching. Jason's siblings shifted uncomfortably, clearly ashamed. His father shook his head slowly, disappointment written across his face. Jason leaned forward, his voice low, almost begging. Emily, we can fix this. Don't do this. I shook my head. No, Jason. You shattered it yourself. And now you'll live with the pieces. He fell silent, his face pale, his eyes darting to his mother as if she might save him. But Linda had nothing left. Every word she had spoken to belittle me, every bit of control she thought she had turned back on her son. He realized it then. The betrayal wasn't just his. It was hers too. Her manipulation, her cruelty, her interference had pushed him here. And now, everything he thought he had, his marriage, his family's respect, his money, was slipping through his fingers. I sat back, calm and collected, while Jason's world cracked around him. For the first time, he understood. He had lost, and it was his mother who had helped me take everything away. After that night, everything began to unravel for Jason. His father was the first to speak against him. He called me privately a few days later, his voice heavy with shame. He told me he had raised his son to be better than this, and he would not stand by a man who could strike his wife and betray his vows. He made it clear Jason was no longer welcome in his home. His siblings followed quickly. The disappointment in their eyes during the dinner had already spoken volumes, but their silence afterward spoke even louder. They stopped answering his calls. They stopped showing up when he asked for help. The bond they once had was cut clean, and it was Jason who held the knife. As for Linda, her place in the family crumbled faster than Jason's. The recording of her encouraging him to cheat spread quietly among relatives, passed from one whispered conversation to another. No one trusted her anymore. The woman who once carried herself as the head of the family now found doors closed in her face. Even those who had tolerated her arrogance before began keeping their distance. Tiffany, the woman he had risked everything for, didn't last long either. At first, she seemed excited to be with him out in the open. But once the divorce proceedings drained his accounts, once the settlement terms were finalized and his assets were halved, her interest dried up. She slipped away without a word, leaving him with nothing but silence where her sweet perfume once lingered. Jason's life collapsed piece by piece. The job that had once been his excuse for every late night suddenly felt shaky under the weight of his reputation. Colleagues whispered. His boss noticed the distraction. His work faltered. He tried to hide it, but there was no hiding the fact that he was spiraling. He went from dinners out and expensive gifts to barely scraping by, from a man admired in public to one avoided. He was no longer Jason the successful husband. He was Jason the cheater, the abuser, the failure. His family turned from him, his mistress abandoned him, and his money slipped through his hands until there was nothing left. And me? I walked away. I signed the papers, closed the chapter, and left without a single look back. I didn't need to see his downfall play out in detail. I didn't need to hear his excuses or his pleas. I had lived through enough. I moved forward with my head high, carrying no weight from him, no chains left behind. He had thought he could break me with his hand, with his betrayal, with his mother's cruel words. But in the end, I was the one who stood tall, untouched, unbroken. Jason was left standing in the ruins of the life he had destroyed himself, and I never once turned around to watch. The first night in my new apartment was quiet. Too quiet, almost. I sat on the floor with a single lamp and a few boxes stacked against the wall. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No footsteps pacing the hall, no sharp words waiting to cut, no shadow of Linda lingering in the corner. Just me and the sound of my own breathing. Starting over wasn't easy. I had to relearn simple things. How to cook just for myself, how to fill evenings without waiting for someone to come home, how to sleep in a bed that suddenly felt too big. But with each passing day, I felt lighter. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peace. I didn't find joy in what had happened to Jason. Watching him lose everything didn't make me smile. But I did feel something else. Justice. A balance restored. For every night I had cried alone, for every insult I had swallowed, for every bruise and every betrayal, there was now an answer. And that answer was freedom. The divorce was finalized in court. I walked through the doors with my head held high, the documents signed and sealed. Jason trailed behind, a man hollowed out, his suit wrinkled, his face tired. Linda wasn't there. She had stopped showing up long before. He was truly alone. As I stepped outside, the sunlight felt different on my skin. Warm, real, untouched by shadows. But then I heard his voice. Emily, wait. I stopped, slowly turning to face him. His eyes were red, his voice cracked. He looked nothing like the man I had once loved. He was broken, desperate, clutching at something already gone. I'm sorry, he said. I was stupid. I let her control me. I let everything slip away. Please give me another chance. I studied him, letting the silence stretch. For a moment, I almost saw the man I had met years ago, the one who made me laugh, who made me feel safe. But that man was long gone, buried under his own choices. I stepped closer, just enough for him to hear me clearly. My voice was calm, steady, without a single crack. You shattered me once, Jason. But now it's your turn to live in pieces. His face crumpled, his hand lifted as if to reach for me, but I turned before he could. I walked away, each step firm, my back straight. I didn't look over my shoulder. I didn't need to. Behind me, he was left standing there, humiliated, small, and alone. In front of me, the path was clear. I wasn't chasing happiness or hope. What I had reclaimed was stronger than both. I had reclaimed myself.